pulls you in and doesn't let go.
Okay. Hello, welcome to the carousel. I have with me today Nicole Kipralov, I believe I'm saying that correctly, to discuss women, the WQ, and women in the movement. And of course, we are going to use the situation with Alex Kaschuta as sort of the way in to discuss this. But you are a young woman who works for think tanks, you do communications work, you do appearances on big TV stations. So maybe give us just an introduction to you and how you got all into this, and then we'll move on to Alex Kaschuta.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. This is very, very exciting. I think obviously so much going on right now, a lot of different, I feel like the news cycle has just been completely saturated and it's never really moved this fast before. So a lot that we could discuss here. But my background is, so I was born and raised New Yorker on Long Island. My family's from Eastern Europe. They're immigrants. Very political family. My mom I always talk about this because it's very relevant to how I started working in politics. She was an anti-communist revolutionary in Bulgaria in the 80s. So she was out on the streets fighting against communism. She was actually one of the few people who started the movement in Bulgaria to topple the communist regime there. And, she's always had that revolutionary spirit in her. My dad, also an immigrant from Bulgaria, he is very much not like that. He was an engineer in Bulgaria, led kind of a quiet life. And they met actually in New York. So they both came here on trips. They met here and, decided to get married, stayed here, and started a business from scratch. So growing up, I really was able to witness my parents making the American dream happen. It's not really a unique story. A lot of people in America have that story, and these are some of the people who are the biggest patriots right now in this country because they know what it's like to escape a repressive political regime and to have the opportunity to come from nowhere and to make something incredible happen and give their kids a better life. So I grew up talking about politics at the dinner table. We've always been, culturally very conservative, always followed politics, and education was a top priority for my family. So I went to all the best schools, and my career started in local and state New York politics and government. So I held many positions in New York State, the New York State Senate, then the New York City Council. I was at the time the youngest chief of staff there, to a member who flipped a seat from blue to red. So she's absolutely incredible. Her name's Vicky Palladino, and she's a powerhouse. I don't know if you remember the Drag Queen Story Hour scandal, actually, a few years ago that when it made headlines, like national headlines. Tucker Carlson was talking about it. That actually started at our office while I was Vicky Palladino's chief of staff. And it was, I could talk more about that, but it was a very formative part of my career, I would say. And then I went on to work in national politics. I worked on the Hill as then House GOP Chairwoman Elise Stefanik's press secretary and political spokesperson. I've done a lot of work with candidates and campaigns all across New York State, mostly in the downstate region. And now I work with the America Fund, and I head two organizations called, one is Coalition for Military Excellence. So we were instrumental in helping put pressure on the previous administration, transitioning over to the new administration to try and take politics out of our military, a big issue that people actually a couple of years ago didn't know too much about. We have another organization called the American Border Story, where we're focused on telling the stories of the victims of the border crisis, the stories that haven't been told yet. There are so many victims all across this country, and they have incredible, devastating, gut-wrenching stories. And so we do a lot of work there. I'm a fellow at the Independent Women's Forum, also at the Club for Growth Foundation. So, a lot of different things. I do media, which is a pretty new thing for me, very exciting. So that's a little bit about me.
That was a resume. That was the resume in,
Where to start?
in 4 minutes. Well, no, it's great. You made it very obvious that you are an authority to speak about what we're going to speak about. So thank you very much, and that's all very well done. And you're very young. You're very young, so that's why it's going to be great to get your perspective. So let's talk about what happened with Alex Kaschuta. So Alex Kaschuta, who, whatever. You may or may not be super familiar with Alex Kaschuta, but she's been in the space that kind of I'm in, the dissident right, since I can remember being involved in it, which really isn't that long ago. And she was like a podcaster, and she's in Romania, so it's actually perfect we're talking to you as a Bulgarian yourself. She interviewed all the kind of interesting people. Like, she would have Curtis Yarvin on. She would have Raw Egg Nationalist on. She would have all of these kind of shit poster types. And she was always just like curious. In doing this podcast early on, I used to listen to a lot of Kaschuta episodes because it was just sort of like a really basic remedial like introduction to X or Y figure. But I always got the sense this is not going to end well. And so a few days ago, this is 4 days ago, the New York Times very excitedly publishes, Michelle Goldberg, whoever that is, very excitedly publishes this piece, "The vibe shifts against the right," with a burned MAGA hat on the ground, thrust onto the ground. And there's a few things. Here's a wonderful Michelle Goldberg, which we can imagine what she's like in real life. But they're doing a few things here. So in the one hand, they're using this word vibe shift, which was coined by my friend Sean Monahan back in 2022 to describe culture's shift to the right, and the sort of cool culture elements of New York and LA and San Francisco starting to turn right. And if you look at the numbers for young people, ages 22 to 29 still go Dem by about, I think, 6 points or something. But 22 to 17 or whatever are right-leaning. Overall, they go to the Republican Party, which is like, who could have ever possibly imagined that? So that's what the vibe shift is articulating, that the young kids are more, find the right more compelling than the left. So they've been very excited. Michelle Goldberg has been just waiting for the day that she can publish this article about the vibe shift going back the other direction to the left again, because then she gets to be cool at dinner parties again. And the person that she hinges this entire article on is Alex Kaschuta. And Alex Kaschuta, her podcast Subversive, she basically says that Alex Kaschuta has abandoned the right, has shifted against the dissident right, because, along with a few other names, she's also saying Richard Hanania, may he rot in hell, Nathan Kofnas, Scott Skiskind, sort of these kind of cool thinker people are all turning against the right. And here is my favorite paragraph of the whole thing. They say, the mother of young children, Kaschuta described internalizing trad wife ideas about women's primacy in the home. When she tried to take on all the domestic labor in her own family, it nearly broke her. She started to realize that while the right new right's racism and misogyny were often delivered with an ironic smirk, it was no joke. As a woman, she said, you'd have to lean back and just accept that people will belittle you. And then the next paragraph says, that she was disgusted by this, and then the tariffs pushed her over the edge into being against the right, which is like, what? But anyway, this is, of course, went very viral. Everybody is piling on Alex Kaschuta, me included. So I would love to get your thoughts, Nicole, on all of this.
Well, I think, there are a lot of different things here to unpack. First of all, this vibe shift. Michelle is absolutely correct. There is a vibe shift, and that vibe shift goes towards the right. I think what we see here is just temporally, this article is not really written well because it's only been about 2 weeks.
Right. It's been like 5 seconds.
It's been like 2 weeks since President Trump talked about the tariffs, and they're still being implemented. It's a negotiating process. And I think, some of the mainstream media, places like Newsmax, have elaborated on this a lot. It's going to take time to feel the effects of the tariffs. So look, if she was writing this, even just before reading it, if she was writing this, let's say a year into the Trump administration, I would say, okay, maybe there's something here, right? Or any person would say, okay, now this makes sense, because it takes time for a cultural shift to happen. It takes time for a mentality shift to happen. So that's my first red flag. Just seeing that headline it's been 2 months. Like, relax. This is not.
I know.
There's no time to feel the effects of.
It's like, what are they talking about? And it's like, that's how it's just such BS, because it's like, it's just so obvious that they're tipping their hand. It's like, yeah, this has been around for 2 weeks. You're talking about like really broad-based economic policy that's like very hard to wrap your head around. Nobody really understands how it's going to go. And then Michelle Goldberg, who I don't think knows anything about tariffs, is saying Trump's tariffs have pushed some to the breaking point because they reveal the immediate material cost of that stupidity. It's like, what is she talking about? Like who has been pushed to the breaking points by tariffs? It's been 5 seconds. Yeah.
Was Romania on the list of tariffs? Maybe it was. Maybe it was. I don't know. Or how are Romanians responding to this? Have they? I mean, this is just, Alex Kaschuta is in Romania, right? Or is she here? I don't know where she is.
No, I think she is in Romania, where, by the way, they're canceling elections. They're canceling elections there. It's against, right wingers.
Across Europe, look what's happening in France with Marine Le Pen. She's pulling ahead. She's the front runner there, and now they're indicting her. It's crazy. But my point is, I think this is just typical for the New York Times. This is what the media does. They take some comment by one of these esoteric underground Twitter right-wingers, members of the dissident right, and kind of blow it up, spin it into this anti-Trump article. But it's really pathetic because, I mean, even just the picture, the MAGA hat, there are people in DC wearing MAGA hats now, and it's the norm. I was, a couple of weeks ago, I was out with some friends the whole day, and I was walking by kind of near the White House, central DC, and there were MAGA hats everywhere. People were, and it was fine. No one was getting assaulted. No one was getting screamed at, right? So, I think there's definitely been a cultural shift that's been happening for the past, I would say, about a year or so. But it's definitely a lot more towards the right. And we've seen a lot of cultural advancements as well in a short period of time. So this article, I mean, I think it has no credibility or gravitas, frankly.
So what do you think about her critiques, though, as a woman in this side of things? She has been on record talking about this and sort of critiquing the participation of women on this side, basically saying, sorry, I know I'm frozen. It'll go away in a second. It's like, ultimately, it's a dead end for women because, I mean, the thing that's so funny in this is it's like she's talking about, she had to take care of her kids and it was too much. And it's like, what does that mean? So I don't know. What do you think in general about her sort of the ability? Look, you're not really on the dissident right, but just as a woman of the right, do you have this conflict within yourself where you feel like you're kind of maybe going against the women's team in some way?
No. So, it's interesting because I'm very passionate about conservative women's issues. I think that conservative feminism, and it's kind of hard to talk about that because of a lot of right wingers will actually say, you can't say feminism. That's you're feminist, you're alt left, you're a radical. And that makes sense because the radical feminist movement has absolutely contributed to the dissolution of this society in so many ways and to the breakdown of some very important cultural values that this country has. And I mean, it's had repercussions all across the globe. But the conservative feminism, if you look at first, second wave feminism, especially first wave feminism and what it stood for, it's something that I would say I definitely identify with. I'm a career woman. I'm very driven. I believe that it's very important for men to practice healthy masculinity and to treat women well. And I think there definitely have been issues with that in the past, for sure. And, I've experienced them myself. I think every woman has, right? But it's very hard to talk about that outside of the context of radical feminism, outside of the context of the effects of the 60s and 70s sexual liberation movement having an impact even in today's society. And I find that there's kind of this interesting cultural thing happening where, because of radical feminism and the way they have suppressed men for so many years, and in both kind of explicit and implicit ways, it's actually led to the deterioration of healthy masculinity. And that's true for men on both sides of the aisle: liberal men, conservative men, Republican, Democrats, men as a whole. We've seen society encouraging, often subliminally, the feminization of men. And what happens is, when men have for so many years felt like they have been suppressed, they can't be men in a healthy way, because masculinity, I don't think masculinity has a propensity to be unhealthy in the context of a civil society. When you're out of the state of nature and you're in a civil society, you have, social contract theory, right? For example, you could talk about Hobbes or Locke or whoever, but when you're in a society that has law and order, masculinity tends to be healthy, right? And that's what we have. We have a society in which, theoretically, we have law and order. So there is no propensity for masculinity to be toxic unless someone is suppressing that healthy masculinity. And I think that's exactly what the radical feminists have been doing, which is why men are either turning to figures like Andrew Tate, as an example, right? Who, and that, I think I'm not okay with that, but I understand why it's happening, because men have felt so suppressed that they need to look to men who say, look, the radical feminists have suppressed us. We have to overcorrect. We have to go at them. We hate women. We're going to abuse women. Show who's in control. Show who's dominant. And it's kind of like a bull being caged. When you have been suppressed for so long in so many different ways, just look at statistics in terms of college admissions for white men. There has been an active effort to suppress white men in college admissions, in the hiring practices of corporations all across this country. That healthy masculinity in a civil society is going to start to turn toxic, as the radical feminists would say. So what's interesting here is that radical feminism set out to get rid of toxic masculinity, and they've actually fueled it. So I think there are still issues with men lashing out, not knowing how to be chivalrous, not knowing how to be gentlemen, not knowing how to treat women. That's why you have a lot of women complaining that they can't find good men. And I don't think that complaint is irrelevant. I think it's valid. I think it's a valid complaint. But let's look at why it happened. Let's look at where it started. And it started with radical man-hating feminists. Now, the other part of this is that there seems to be this trend of women, and we know this is happening on the liberal side, right, in Democrat circles, liberal circles, but we're starting to see it infiltrating conservative circles as well when it comes to women. When women are not able to find men who are providers, who are healthily masculine, who are strong, the way we want men to be, the way men were created by God and by biology, they're starting to turn to, obviously, their careers, but also promiscuity, right? So we've seen a rise in promiscuity. And I think this is where conservative women especially need to be careful, because we've seen, a lot of commentary on the importance of getting back to a society where being a trad wife is valued, and it has gravitas, and it has meaning. And I think being a traditional housewife, stay-at-home mother is an absolutely beautiful thing. I think women should be encouraged to do that if they'd like to do that. I think it's better for society for more women to have that option. I think it leads to healthier parenting, better parenting, which leads to, young people growing up in a much healthier environment, as opposed to being raised by nannies and babysitters or teachers or whoever, right? Little kids need their mothers. But this concept of a trad wife is being fetishized now a bit on the right.
Mm-hmm.
That's where conservative women especially need to be careful and start fighting against this kind of overcorrection, right? Like we want to preserve and glorify what it means to be a trad wife, but a trad wife is someone she's not promiscuous, right? She's not, she is staying true to conservative values and principles that are in alignment with traditional conservatism, and not, you can't shove the framework you can't shove the concept of a traditional housewife into the framework of a modern liberalist kind of viewpoint. And I think that's what's happening right now. But anyway, there are a lot of different dynamics here. And I can go on and on about this, but I think we do see some issues on the right as well. I don't think Alex Kaschuta's issue sounds like a personal problem. Maybe she should have a talk with her husband about, how to figure out that family dynamic. But I do think it's important for conservatives to really look critically at some of these cultural issues that are happening. And if there is an issue on our side, if there is an issue on the right, we have to talk about it, right? If we're seeing more and more women expressing promiscuity, we have to talk about why that's not in alignment with the movement that we want.
What do you mean? The one thing I'm a little unclear on what you're saying is, what's the promiscuity part that you're saying?
So, I think,
who's being promiscuous in this thing? Are you saying men are being promiscuous or women are being promiscuous?
Well, I think both, but I think women especially, when we talk about traditional conservatism, we have to look at, I think there's a double standard, and there probably should be. Promiscuity in women is just not something that's very healthy, right? I mean, there have been so many studies done that show that having an outrageous number of partners in your life it leads to a decline in happiness. And there is a faction of the movement, people like Matt Walsh, who talk about this a lot. Even people like Megyn Kelly, who's a little bit more progressive in that regard, they talk about this a lot. And I think it's important to talk about it, but it's not, it's happening on all sides, and it's happening within people of all ideologies. And my point is, it's up to conservative women to come out and say, okay, this is not good, right? Like we want women to not fall to stay true to conservatism and traditionalism, and to not be swayed by progressive sexual liberation ideology.
Yeah, it's such a difficult thing to parse, though, right? Because here we have, you brought up Megyn Kelly. Here we have Megyn Kelly saying this very inflammatory thing that she said not long ago. This tweet got 4 million views. She says, "Ladies, it is possible to make your own money, have your own career, pay for your own swanky apartment, NYC apartment, etc., and find a man who loves you, wants to have and raise kids with you, and wants to be with you and only you. The only thing stopping you, your decision to settle for less." So what did you think of this tweet from Megyn Kelly? Do you think that this tweet sort of is this what you're talking about when you say, like we need to stick with sort of first wave feminism and traditional values? Like, is this what you mean by conservative feminism? Because I feel like this is what conservative feminism is.
Yeah, I do. This is what I mean by it. I mean that you can maintain traditional values of conservatism in your marriage with one man who loves you, and you stay married for a long time and you make it work, and you get married before the eyes of God, and you take vows, and this is the traditional family unit. But if you are passionate about a career path, if there's something that you want to do, and if you want to contribute to society in another way besides just being a mother and a wife, then you can do that. I think that's what conservative feminism is. The reason why it's both conservative and it's kind of traditional feminism is because it's conservative in that Megyn Kelly's talking about finding a man who loves you and is willing to take care of you and to provide for you. And the more kind of feminist part is, if you still want to have a career, if you still want to, make money, you can do that as well, and then you can merge that with someone who loves you, and you can take, you can have seasons of your life where you're just a stay-at-home mom, and maybe later you go back to a career, or maybe you spend your 20s, your early to mid 20s focused on your career, you're making a lot of money, and then you meet someone who loves you and can provide for you, and maybe you decide to be a stay-at-home mom for the rest of your life, right? So I think it doesn't have to be very rigid. But I think what she's saying here does preserve what I was talking about in terms of the integrity of conservative values.
Sure.
As
so
well. Right.
This to you is sort of a reference to conservative feminism. I think that the issue, like, look, this is great. It's totally fine to have this perspective as a woman. There's nothing wrong with having this perspective, right? The issue with it is that it's impractical. The issue is that it also doesn't take into consideration men at all. And look, that's fine. You don't have to have every perspective. You have the right to want to have it all, right? And that's what I would say about this tweet. It's like, okay, Megyn, like, great. If you want to have it all, better this be all, right? Better have conservative. Here's a good thing that somebody's saying, which we'll get to. But better to have conservative feminism, as you're saying, where it's like, hey, we're monogamous, we love each other, etc., than have radical feminism, which is let's be lesbians and have fake kids, and you're right, we hate men, and etc. So in that sense, I don't take issue with it on its face, right? But as a commenter just said, I think the big problem is that almost all women want their boyfriend, husband to earn more than them. And that's not feasible now for every guy. It's certainly not. And she's also saying here, she's not saying, I want my husband to earn more than me, right? She's saying, I want my husband to be at home and wanting to be with you and only you, right? But she's saying make your own money, not rely on a man to make your own money, right? I do think, though, that this commenter is kind of correct. Like, once you start getting into the world where the man stops being the provider and you, the woman, are out on the news 12 hours a day and you have a nanny at home taking care of your kid and the man is sitting around being like, okay. I mean, there's men that prefer that. There are men that prefer that. There's men that prefer that outcome, and that's totally fine. But I would say that most women in the world, if we're really being honest about the nature of women, they're not going to want that guy. They're not going to want stay-at-home house husband man. Like, yeah, sure, like it's convenient, but like it's sexually, and not only just sexually, just like attraction-wise, they're not going to want that guy, right?
Yeah, but I don't think that's what she's saying. I think that's exactly right. I don't think any man who wants to have healthy development and find a high quality woman, whether she's stay at home or not, should be thinking, you know what, I'm preparing for a life of being a stay at home dad.
Right. I mean, no woman wants a guy saying I'm preparing for a life of stay at home dad, right?
Provider. But I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. I don't think a woman who wants to have a career and maybe take breaks to, raise her kids, or maybe she has a career from home, right? Maybe she has a business or a consulting company, or she's, she is on the news, but she's not on the news. She's on the news, I don't know, a few times a week, something like that, right? Whatever it is, right? Whatever it is. I think, I don't think that's mutually exclusive with having a man who's still a provider, right? Or having a man who is, or maybe they're both providers, but they find a way to make it work. Or maybe they have a schedule where it's, and, I think we've seen a lot of, I don't know the details of their personal lives, but a lot of prominent conservative women in politics, people like Sarah Huckabee Sanders and, Megyn Kelly herself and Caroline Levitt and Elise Stefanik and all these other women, they themselves have Michelle Malkin, who is, has been in these circles for a long time. They themselves have talked about how they've had periods of their lives where their husbands have worked from home or stayed home with the kids more, or maybe, they were more present weekends and nights or something like that, or they took a break from their careers, or they have like Megyn Kelly has a podcast from her house, right, so she can be with her kids. So I think it doesn't have to be that rigid. What I do think is important is, in whatever arrangement you have, that you stay true to putting God and your family first. Your kids should come first no matter what. And if that means saying no to opportunities because it's inconvenient for your family, then that's what you do. And maybe there's another opportunity that comes along down the line when, maybe you want to run for office, but your kids are already in college and they're fine. They don't need you to be with them all the time. That's what you do. I mean, this is true even for men. I know, Lee Zeldin, New York congressman. I've known him for many years, and I've heard many of his speeches, and I was at an event recently, and he was talking about how his kids are now, his twin daughters are now in college. And, he has time on his hands, and he said, obviously now he's at the EPA, but this was before that. He was talking about how it's a great time to get even more involved, and his wife was very supportive of that. So, I think you can contribute to society in ways that you would like to, while prioritizing your family, especially as a woman, while prioritizing your kids, as long as you have that supportive partnership and it's a strong marriage that's monogamous and that stays true to what God's will is for you. So I think, that's my view on things.
Yeah, I think there's nothing wrong with being idealistic about these things and having the goal that you want to reach. I think the problem that people like me took with this tweet is it's just so idealized. It's like, there is no man in this. There's no man being a man in this calculation. In this calculation, there is a man in a very tiny little box doing what Megyn Kelly wants him to do. And the man version of this, right, is completely different than Megyn Kelly's version of this. So it's like, I respect that Megyn Kelly in her life has worked hard and been able to get what she wants, which is this female conservative fantasy, right? But for 99.9999% of women, that is not possible. It's not going to happen. She's not going to, having this perfect balance of a man who does exactly what you want at home, and he doesn't get mad when you're not there, and he doesn't get pissed when you don't earn more than him, and he doesn't get pissed when you're not, contributing enough because you're off being on TV. That is not an understanding of what men are, right? That's an understanding of what women are, and that's fine. Again, men and women can be different. They can want different things. I think that just it's just really, really idealized, and it's like, yeah.
The context of this is she was responding to the Ashley St. Clair controversy.
Oh, so tell us about that.
So this wasn't in a vacuum. That's why I think it sounds idealistic, because this actually, she posted it. I can't see the date on there, but it was definitely a day or two. It might have been the same day as the Ashley St. Clair Elon Musk controversy.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So that was the context for that. So I think that's important to keep in mind, because I don't think she was just putting that out there as this, hey, by the way, ladies, this is what you can do. I mean, that's what it says, but this was in response to Ashley St. Clair and, that whole controversy with her, Elon Musk giving her money. Is it his kid? Is it not his kid? And not having a relationship. So I took it, when I saw that tweet, I actually took it to mean, or that X post, I saw kind of, this was her critique on not Ashley St. Clair and Elon Musk not sticking to traditional, Ashley St. Clair not being a traditional woman. That's how I interpreted that. I think if it was in a vacuum, I'd probably agree with you more, but there was a lot of, there were a lot of people praising Ashley St. Clair after what happened. And so I think Megyn was
wow.
just
what were they praising? Who was praising Ashley St. Clair?
It was just the first day. I think everyone was sending supportive messages to her, and then she came out with the New York Post photo shoot, and that was, that I think people started to not say anything after that. But this was happening in the context of all that.
Yeah. Well, what I'll say is, like, again, if this is the model for women, it's so much better than the Ashley St. Clair model, if that's what you're saying, right? I mean, it's like, and I think that the risk of some forms of feminism is that it's really in a stroke of incredible irony, they lead to harems. They lead to what has historically been considered like the least feminist type of arrangement, because without one-to-one marriage, and this is what the whole red pill on the dissident right is about, right? This is what the whole Andrew Tate, I mean, he's the very, very low IQ version of it, but like the whole red pill that I experienced coming into the dissident right was all about this notion of hypergamy, and that basically without rules, without religion, without pressure to not be super promiscuous, as you were saying, what actually happens in the default of society is you have the Elon Musk situation, which is one guy with one guy with a lot of power and money that all the women want, right? They all want this one guy. They don't want all these lower level guys. They want him. He just has 10 wives, more or less, right? And that's essentially what's happening with Elon Musk.
Yes and no, because I think there are ways to make practical changes, and I don't know what the solution to all of this is and how to get our society back to the way it should be, and how to have everything operate in a kind of synchronized way under God. I think there are specific steps that can be taken to kind of address some of these concerns that you're bringing up. For example, J.D. Vance, the vice president, and actually Vivek Ramaswamy have talked a lot about, empowering men. I think that's so important. That's a priority for the Trump administration right now. And it should be our cultural priority as well, to remedy the suppression of men and empower them to pursue.
Remedy the suppression, but we don't want like male empowerment. You know what I mean? Like that would not be it's
empowerment. But what is male empowerment? Rolling back DEI programs.
Yes,
that's definitely a great example.
For sure.
Because now you don't have men, especially white men, dealing with these obstacles of trying to find a job.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. No, 100%. No, exactly. And that's what, yes, in that sense, where the empowerment is just removing the totally unfair obstacles, to give men an actual chance, is fine. I just think it's like if you start framing it in, I mean, the thing that I've always totally rejected about the whole like men's rights thing is I can't stand when a bunch of men are talking about like whining about like, it's not, it's I've been assaulted, we have to be realistic about the difference between men and women, right? We have to be, it's like a man hitting a woman is not the same as a woman hitting a man. Whereas men's rights activists say that's exactly the same. And I think that that's actually adopting the frame of the ridiculous left, is this like notion of pure equality, right? But at the same time, I think let's read one more thing from Alex Kaschuta, and then I'll sort of like kind of make my point. But I think that the upshot of being realistic is also going to have to, unfortunately, Nicole, take us into the workplace. We're going to have to be realistic in the workplace also. And so we can't, if we're genuinely on the right, we can't be like, okay, men can be men and women can be women and we want traditional values and blah, 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 besides in the workplace. Because that's where everything gets all fucked up, right? Everything gets all screwed up.
I was going to say, I don't think every woman should be in the workforce. I don't think so. I don't believe that. I think there is an overwhelming number of women who enter the work. First of all, they go to college, and then I'm not saying I'm a big proponent of higher education, another point I differ with a lot of conservatives on, but it's not for everyone. Some people don't want to go to college. Some people want to go to trade school. Some people want to get married right out of high school. We should be pushing forward these ideas and make them, normalize them, and encourage women who don't want to go to college, women who don't want to go into the workplace. We need to normalize culturally. This is a mentality shift that needs to happen. It's a beautiful, incredible, very difficult thing to stay at home, get married, stay at home, be a housewife, be a mother, and take care of your kids. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. She immigrated to this country, she worked for a little bit, and then she's been a stay-at-home mom, and she has one biological kid, and that's me, right? And it's been the hardest job.
You're an only child?
I have two older stepbrothers, but I am my parents' only biological child. So she had one child, and she stayed at home. And it was very hard for her, right? Because it's a difficult thing, but it's a beautiful thing. And it's how women contribute to society in a very essential and necessary way. And we have to put out that messaging. Now, there are women who also have passions, who want to pursue careers, but they shouldn't be pursuing careers for the purpose of pursuing a career. And they shouldn't be pursuing a career because they can't find a man to settle down with. I think the issue is kind of twofold here. We have to work on the women's side of things, and we have to work on the men's side of things. If women want to settle down, but cannot find a man who's going to love them, be loyal to them, and provide for them, then they have no choice but to go into the workplace. We don't want that to be happening. We want to ensure that our men are working. They are, maybe you don't like this word, but they're empowered, meaning they are motivated to make money. They're healthily masculine. They are family minded, because a lot of men are not family minded. And again, that's the result of radical feminism. But it's a twofold issue here. It's not, I don't think it's black or white. And I think the solution has to be comprehensive.
Yeah, I totally agree on all fronts. It's just, and I love what you're saying about, right, it's like some women it should be much more of an option to not have to work all this time. It's just, unfortunately, it's like, it's very, very difficult to differentiate. It's like society tends to generally have like one message, and that message tends to benefit the people at the top of that society, as long as, especially when things are really corrupt and really bad, which is they've been for a really long time. And then, so I've always interpreted look, we have on level one that women should be free to do what they want, which is true. And we have that on level one, that working in a workplace for many women, maybe even most women, is fun. At least at first, it's fun. It feels good. It's a good environment. It's like a nice, it's nice to contribute and have coworkers and, be part of something. And, that's all true.
But a lot of these women don't want to be working. I mean, that's a very controversial thing to say.
Right. Well, but again, then it becomes like that little desire that's kind of like a shallow desire, then becomes, oh, okay, freeze your eggs and come work for the company for 40 years and, like spend 12 hours a day sending emails for me. And then, oh, whoops, like, I get, like, as, I'm a student of propaganda. One of the great propaganda campaigns of all time by Edward Bernays is Torches of Freedom, which was to get female feminists in the 30s to smoke cigarettes, because they were like, don't let the men tell you can't smoke. Like a little bit of what's happened with women in the workplace is that it's like, don't let the men control you. Come work for me for 80 hours a week and show them, and it's like, well, okay, but did you actually do anything, or did you just get taken advantage of? And I think that now women are realizing, oh, we got kind of taken advantage of a little bit here, at least. But I also agree with you completely. You got to give women a chance. I believe in that. I believe, I'm a free market guy. If a woman wants to show up and make a company, if she wants to go work for a company, I think she should be able to do that.
And actually,
yes, right.
I think a lot of men, conservative men I talk to all the time, friends, colleagues will say, my goal is to give my wife an option if she wants to. And even Matt Walsh said that, because he and Meghan have been feuding a lot about this.
Have they?
Matt Walsh said, look, my wife, she loves to do fundraisers at our school, and that's time consuming. It's a job. She gets paid for it, whatever. I encourage her to do that. A lot of men, actually, healthy conservative men, will say, I want to be able to give my future wife, an option. If she wants to do something, if she's passionate, if something comes up, even we talk about Vicky Palladino, the council member who I worked for. She, in her 60s, decided to run for office, right? I mean, she all of a sudden decided to run for office. And she is providing a tremendous amount of value in New York City, and she's turning the city around. And if it wasn't for her strong voice, the city would be even worse, at a worse place right now. She's done a lot. She's been responsible for reinstating a lot of the frontline workers who were laid off because of the vaccine mandates. She's brought about a lot of cultural change in the city. She's one person, but she's done so much with her voice. But, she wasn't this kind of 9 to 9 career woman in the corporate world for 40 years of her life before that, right?
Right.
But her husband, she was in a position where she had that choice. In her 60s, she's going to do this. So, I think that's important. And another point is, I think part of changing this narrative about what women should be doing, or giving women, or really glorifying and portraying in a positive light motherhood, being a housewife, being a stay-at-home mom. A part of that is talking about parenting, right? Like what we just saw with Austin Metcalf, and I forgot his first name, but Anthony, the kid who stabbed Metcalf.
Yeah. So what exactly happened with that? Everybody is, of course, talking about this, and I haven't actually even totally followed it. What exactly happened?
So this kid, I guess they were both at a track meet or something, and Austin Metcalf, who is a twin brother, him and Hunter Metcalf, I think it's Austin and Hunter Metcalf. They were sitting somewhere on the bleachers at a school, and then Anthony comes out. This is his last name. I forgot his first name. Anthony comes up and says, or I think it was the opposite. Anthony was sitting, and the Metcalf brothers wanted to sit where the other boy was sitting, and so there was an altercation, and then Anthony took out a knife and stabbed Austin Metcalf in the heart, and he bled out in his twin brother's arms. And now there was a press conference by an organization that is in support of Anthony. They're a radical leftist organization because the boy Anthony is Black, and now it's a Black kid stabbing a white kid, and there's a race component to this now. And during this press conference, my point was the mother of Anthony made the entire press conference about her family being victims, right? Again, her son was the one who stabbed and killed this innocent boy who I guess was just arguing, right? There were, 17, 18-year-old boys. They were arguing. And the entire thing was her family getting targeted. This is racism. This is whatever. Again, this is the mother of the child who killed the innocent boy. And so when I saw this, I was in this press conference, I think yesterday or the day before, and Austin Metcalf's dad wanted to go to the press conference because he wanted to forgive his son's killer. And they escorted him out, and they said it was inappropriate for him to be there. I mean, it was just ridiculous. They made the whole thing about racism. And my point here is, I was thinking about this because parenting, like this is about parenting, because your son to get to a point where your son will, in an argument, take a knife and stab someone through the heart and kill them. Like that is a parenting issue. And apparently that's a very controversial opinion because, well, she shouldn't be prosecuted. She's not the killer. I never said she should be prosecuted. But we have to talk about why the quality of parenting has deteriorated. And I think it's a big part of, the school shooter issues that this country has experienced. Mental health, it's not a gun problem. It's a mental health problem. It's a mental health resources problem. And it's a parenting problem. And the last The last parent of a school shooter who actually talked about this was Susan Klebold. Her son, Dylan Klebold, was one of the perpetrators of the Columbine high school shooting decades ago. And she went on I think she's went on a series of public speaking engagements where she talked about how she failed as a parent and how she every single day carried that guilt.
What did she say specifically? Why? I didn't realize that. Did she say, because that's really like the original, that's the first school shooting, or not the actual first, but like the first big one. But did she say why she failed as a parent?
Well, I don't remember the specifics. I've definitely watched a few of her speeches, but I think, she just talked about not seeing the red flags and her son being in the basement playing video games. And we know there have been studies done on Columbine specifically tying video games and porn to his deteriorating mental state and how all of that led to it, right? And so, she talked about just not being there to see what was going on with her kid. And so, this isn't about putting blame on the parents, but it's about saying, look, we need to instill, we need to have this mentality shift in society, especially when it comes to women, the messaging surrounding women. And we have to talk about why it's so important for women to be mothers. First of all, that you are a mother first. When you have children, you are a mother, and then you can focus on your career. Then you're whatever your profession is. But I think that this is the parenting aspect is a critical part of this messaging campaign that I think the right needs to be launching, targeted at women, to encourage more of them to do what they actually want, which is to stay home and take care of their kids. This isn't about suppressing women. It's not about telling women you can't have a career, you can't have it all. It's just about saying, look, you don't have to go to college. You don't have to have a career if you don't want to. You can have a very fulfilling, beautiful, incredible life being a stay-at-home mother, whatever it is. So, yeah, that's why I want.
Well, and yeah, right. It's like, particularly with the Black community, if you look at the huge rise in violence, it's like, who actually, we talk about, somebody commented, it's a perfect example of luxury beliefs. It's like, who got the most screwed by feminism? It's like Black women, because they're just like, all right, well, I used to be there used to be one income and I could find a guy who could support both of us. Oh, now we got feminism and the woman needs to work too. And when you already have no money and you're already in this, society where you're, even if you're a biological racist, you still have to admit that they're at a disadvantage, for whatever reason it is. You're looking around and you're like, well, fuck that. This sucks. Like, I'm being forced to work. I didn't used to have to work, but now the white women who don't have to work want me to work, right? And so like, they're like, they're the people who actually get screwed. And if you look at the Black community, nobody has suffered more under liberalism than them. That being said, I, of course, do not in any way, I think the whole family should be, launched into space personally, but, of this killer, like, I don't want to hear anything about it at all. Like, I don't want any excuses, like, whatever, screw them. But to kind of go back to what you're saying, let's go back to Kaschuta here for a second, who's speaking to exactly what you're saying. And I think she's speaking totally wrongly. So I just want to read this. She's actually a great writer, old Kaschuta, but, this is her kind of like, this was her big turn moment, right? This was like a year ago, she like obviously turned against the right. And it was with this tweet. So let me just read it. And it's clear that, some people have suggested that she made the big turn basically because trolls were calling her names, like calling her fat and calling her ugly. And that's the real reason she shifted. And I think there's probably some truth to that. But anyway, here's her post where she goes against the family. She goes, "Are men trustworthy? This is at the heart." Let me make this bigger. Are men trustworthy? This is at the question at the heart of politics for women. Women on the right make a trade. Autonomy for protection of other men with the men in these circles. They become kin, wives, and mothers to benefit from that protection. That's why even the moderates on the right use the think about your mother, sister, wife to humanize women, because that's the central conceit. Once you have children, the question of trustworthiness is even more acute. Protecting your children from predation, violence, and hunger becomes the central preoccupation of your life. Men either alleviate these fears or they add to them. The bet most women make politically is, I'll take my chances with the faceless machine who doesn't care enough to hurt me in particular. And I think this is a very good point. I actually really like how she set this up. She's saying women of the left are like, I'll take the welfare, or I'll take the egg freezing large tech corporation where I have this email job. I'll take them because I can kind of rely on them over the scariness of a single, man. I like that she's teeing it up because I think that's very honest. I think that's completely insane, but I think it's very honest. So then she finishes by saying, does it provide sufficient protection? She's talking about like the Borg, the workplace Borg welfare state. No, but its dangers are diffuse and don't target them on a personal level. They carve out an existence around its flaws. There are paths to exit in an egalitarian system. The reality is that the most dangerous place for a woman is still the home. This isn't some paranoid fantasy. The threat of private violence is larger for women than the threat of public violence. Is this a permanent equilibrium? Maybe not, but it sure looks like the best bet given current circumstances. As long as men on the right, more generally, don't understand the inherent vulnerability of the right-wing woman position and the question of trustworthiness as preceding any other principles, because this is the mechanism by which the principles are actually applied or not in real life, they will continue to alienate women. As if that's the friggin' goal. This drives me so crazy. It's not about buying them off. It's about which environment will I and my children most likely survive in on a very deep level. Reading the lurid revenge fantasies of thousands of men itching for power on this app is an education in careful what you wish for. So I don't think I've ever hated a tweet as much as I hate this tweet because it drives me insane. And it drives me insane because she's basically doing this argument of scaring the hoes. She's saying, hey, nerds, stop scaring, don't say mean things about women. Stop scaring the hoes. Because if you scare the hoes, then women are going to not marry you and not like the movement. And nothing could be fucking further from the truth than that. But anyway, what do you think of this tweet?
I think she says a few things that I'm just like, this is blatantly false, right? So talking about violence in the home,
but that's really like
that's egregious. I mean, but that's very easily disputed just by looking at statistics, right? Like that's domestic abuse rates are not as high as a lot of feminists will make them out to be. This is also a very individual thing. It's also I'm not a psychologist. I'm not an expert on how women think, but a lot of women, what they'll do is, they have this victimization complex. And I don't know her specifically. I don't know her situation, but they have this victimization complex where they'll be in one abusive relationship and then they'll go from abusive relationship to abusive relationship to abusive relationship because they don't work through those issues that they have, that complex. And so they will repeat the same pattern over and over again and find safety in that, right? And find comfort in that in a very twisted way. And again, I'm not a psychologist, but this is just, from reading and from what I've gathered. And then they'll kind of seek an avenue of relief from that and empowerment. And they'll come out and say, well, domestic abuse, violence, this is a major thing. This is a major problem. And it's because their personal patterns, behavioral patterns, and their experiences color their perception. So they'll take it and they'll generalize. And that's honestly what this sounds like. Again, I'm not commenting on her personal life. I'm just saying that, to make the egregious claim that the most violent place for a woman is in the home. I'm
sure statistically that's true, right? I'm sure this is a very rationalist argument. It's a very rationalist, Excel-brained, line go up tech argument, which is, I'm sure, technically speaking, if you look at a piece of paper, more bad stuff happens to women in the home than happens to them in the world, right? I'm sure that that's true. But to extrapolate that into this is ridiculous.
Yeah, and she's providing cultural commentary here.
Right. Yeah. It's like,
This is not the culture that
Yeah.
American women live in. Maybe in
She's-
another
yeah.
country, sure, but this is not the American culture.
and it's this perspective is so corrosive to the right because she's saying don't be a man. She's saying be afraid, make sure you're pandering to women all the time, and don't come off as dangerous. Don't be dangerous, because if you seem dangerous, women are going to feel uncomfortable and they're going to not be comfortable, and then they're going to go be left wing. And that is total BS. That is not why women become left wing, because they're afraid of men. I mean, maybe originally, but not anymore.
And this also goes back to what I was saying before, is this idea of trying to turn men into not men and trying to corrode and erode masculinity. That has a backwards effect, right? That's going to have very serious repercussions. She's actually going to get more of what she thinks is the problem the more you do that. The more we feminize men, the more we tell men, don't be men, don't be strong, don't be assertive, don't be these things, the more that they're going to try and overcorrect for that. And that's when you get into the toxic masculinity territory. I mean, I don't like to use that word because it's been taken over by radical feminists, but that's when you get into behaviors that no one likes. But the reason for that is ironically what she's saying, right? The more you try to suppress men in that way instead of cultivating healthy masculinity, the worse it gets. So this is not, or it goes in the direction you don't want it to go in. But yeah, I mean, I think I don't know what kind of instigated this, but it sounds more like a personal problem, frankly.
What instigated it is the same. I mean, Megyn Kelly also said at a certain point, "Why is there no women on the Trump administration, admin team?" And it's like, people say that to me actually all the time about the podcast. They say, "Well, why don't you have more women?" And look, if it was 1800, that question would be totally legitimate. It would be, hey, why not? That would be an interesting perspective to get. Like, that's fine. Today, that question is the problem. That question is the problem, because that question is what burrows into dudes' minds, and they start to think about it and worry about it. And then that's how the balance tips to where men actually totally abandon being men. Men are not equipped to fight with women. We aren't able to do it. We can't think of women as our enemy, as our rivals, really. And so when she's doing something like this, or when anybody is doing this calculus where they're trying to nag men into including women. You need to include women. Why? Because they're women. Like, no, that is leftism. That is leftism. Oh, no, right? It is. Like that is literal leftism. So it's like,
yes. That's gender quotas over merit. That flies in the face of merit, and that's what we're fighting for. Is we want a merit-based society.
Exactly. So as soon as you start hearing that, from a woman, it's like, my perspective is it just can't be listened to, because not because it's wrong, not because I hate women, not because I don't like working with women. I do like working with women. I would much rather, in certain circumstances, have women around than not. But it's just, as soon as you start asking those questions, then you're going into the path to leftism, I would say.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that is just leftism. That's what we're fighting against, for sure. Absolutely.
Right. Okay. So where do you see are you Gen Z?
I'm a millennial.
You are a millennial. Okay. You're a millennial, but you're a young millennial.
Yeah. Well, right. I'm on the border between millennial and Gen Z.
Yeah, I think you might be Gen Z. I think I saw when you graduated. I feel like you're maybe Gen Z. But
I'm 96, and that's still millennial.
Damn, that's amazing. Born in 1996. That's the great year. You were born in the best year in human history.
Oh, really?
Okay, so yeah, so that's what you're seeing this kind of, you've got a long time to sort this all out. And so I guess what I would say, where are you seeing this going? Like, how do you think the right will change in the coming years now that Trump has won? Where do you think culture is going to go with regard to men and women? Like with the Andrew Tate question, like is Tate going to keep being big? Is it going to get worse and worse? How do you see things evolving?
Yeah, so I think we've seen already, big cultural wins for the right that we don't. It's kind of crazy to think that we should even be talking about this, but even something like President Trump signing an executive order saying there are only two genders. I consider that a big win, but I feel weird about it because why are we wasting time on this? And why did President Trump take a bullet for us for this? Like, really? And banning biological men from women's sports, again, another one of those no-brainer things. And frankly, if you don't agree that there are two genders, if you don't agree that biological men should not be in women's sports, you're mentally ill. Like, you need serious help. Like, that's just it. That's just it. And that is a great example of me saying that, me being able to say that openly. I mean, I'd say it no matter what, but I think that's starting to have more of these conversations and being able to have the freedom to just say that. I consider as a big win, because if you remember, under the Biden administration, and people were getting doxxed, people were getting harassed, people were getting, fired. If you said anything like that, this is the reality. So I think we're going to see more and more of that. I think now is, I know everyone is saying this, but I truly believe that now is the time to act, and it's time to codify all of these cultural gains. So when we're talking about the executive order on the two sexes. Okay, that's great. That's an executive order that could get reversed in 4 years if we don't have a Republican in office. So how are we codifying that, not just on a national level, but also on, state level, right? We want state legislatures across this country to be passing legislation, to be turning this into laws that govern their states, but also on a local level, right? So when we talk about getting DEI and gender ideology out of school curricula, it's not enough to just dismantle the Department of Education. What happens after that? What happens on the state and local level? And is there an accountability mechanism on a state and local level to ensure that no school in this country promotes gender ideology, that no sports team and the entire country allows biological men into women's spaces, into women's sports or women's spaces? That, pronouns, no one's using pronouns anywhere, right? That this concept of non-binary is gone. We don't want that. There's no space for that because it's lunacy. It's not, it doesn't align with biology. It doesn't align with religion, any religion. Doesn't matter what you believe in. It doesn't align with anything. So, I think the next step here, and something that I actually fear conservatives, Republicans are not going to do enough of this, is to carry through the national, both on a legislative level and a cultural level, the national sentiment to carry through that to a state and local level. I've been talking a lot about this on Newsmax because, and on just media in general, because I just think it's, I think that there's a limit to what President Trump can do, and there's a limit to what his cabinet can do when it comes to this. We need to put more resources into our state and local campaign infrastructure, because we want to ride that national wave, that started in November, that momentum. We want to carry it through, but that also means getting representatives, getting the right people elected on a state and local level. It means more conservative-oriented parents on school boards. So school boards elections are going to be absolutely critical, because again, there's so much subversion, and the Democrats don't care about the laws, and they don't care about breaking them. Obviously, right? That's obvious. So unless you have again, a very strong enforcement mechanism on a state and local level to enforce some of these changes, then, we're going to end up where we started, just a few months ago or 4 years ago, before President Trump took office. But that might not answer your question directly about men and women, but I do think that it applies. What I'm saying applies to everything, right? Even if there are cultural changes that, more conversations that we're having about the role of men and women in society, how do we codify that? Like, what does it look like putting that into practice? Does that mean starting organizations, maybe a chain of organizations, like from a grassroots perspective on a local level, to reach out to women voters in different, not voters, but just women in different communities, and having those organizations be informed by a central messaging apparatus? An organization like Independent Women's Forum that specifically focuses on the family unit, preserving the family unit, empowering women to be housewives, to be mothers. How do we give them the resources? For example, women who are in distress and who have dealt with abuse, and let's say, they're pregnant. Like, how do we create more infrastructure to encourage those women to keep their babies and raise their babies, as opposed to turning to abortion, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's just a lot of nitty gritty work to be done on a local and state level, that I think is not being done right now by conservatives, by Republicans. And I think that work is directly related to a larger cultural mindset shift that our society has to keep making.
Yeah, which is like cultural, right? I mean, it's like, that's like, I did a long piece on AmFest in the most recent Frontier magazine. I went there, and kind of one of the themes of that article is that everybody says the same thing. Everybody. Charlie Kirk says it. Who's the Pennsylvania guy who shifted Pennsylvania? What?
Kessler?
Yeah, Scott Pressler. They all say the same thing, which is, I care more about culture than politics. And I think that they're saying that for the exact reason that you're saying, which is, unless some real boots on the ground kind of stuff happens, it's just going to go right back to where it was. Yeah. I would say that I have a couple responses to that. On the one hand, if we're going to change culture, it's going to have to be by force. And I don't mean actual force. I mean, people are going to have to get serious about actually taking over left-wing cultural institutions. And by that, I mean Hollywood, I mean the universities, I mean publicity, I mean media, not just having our own stuff. We have to literally take their shit from them. And that's going to be kind of hard. I think we can do it. I think it's just, there's very, very few people who get that that's what needs to be done. I think we have all the ammo to do it. I think it's just, we gotta literally undermine their institutions from within. So that's one thing. On the other hand, I think politically, what people like you have done, and what Pressler has done, and what this whole new regime of Musk and everybody, they've really figured out how they've got the politics down. They've figured out how to get the right people, how to recruit the low propensity voters, and that will affect culture. I mean, eventually that will push culture to the right more and more and more. And I think inevitably we have to win, because as you've just said, so much of what the right stands for, or the left stands for, particularly with regard to gender, is completely insane. And it's insane on its face. And so that's why you have 19-year-olds to 22 leaning Republican, which is insane, because they're seeing the stuff that the left is doing, and they're just like, this is crazy. I don't believe this. I don't care if my teacher tells me this. I don't believe it. So I think ultimately we're headed for a massive cultural victory, and it's just going to probably get better and better. I do think, though, that we have to get serious about literally taking over the institutions by force.
I've been talking about that so much, because the reason why academia is so left wing is because conservatives ran from it. And don't go to college, we'll build our own. Don't go to, don't get away from academia, we'll build our own stuff. Get away from mainstream media, we'll build our own stuff. And I'm very pro alternative media, but there are always going to be people who are going to watch mainstream media. What about them, right? You can't run away from the problems. We never would be in a position where we have to take back our institutions if we didn't run away from them to begin with.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think that, the parallel economy is good because it pressures the other side. You got to do both. Like, you have to have the alternative option, and you have to basically beat up the systems. And the way to beat them up, it's actually way easier than people think. You just have to get really, really good publicists. That's what I keep saying. We talk about this. We need great publicists, and you got to get a great publicist that knows how to get something, not just in Newsmax and, these things that you and I are on, Blaze, OAN. These are great. And it's really good to have this parallel world, especially, and that world is getting better and better. It's getting more and more culturally relevant and good. On the other hand, you have to have people that are able to pipe into that old system and start infiltrating the messaging over there and being like, why isn't X new cool right-wing celebrity or whatever it is, why aren't they on the front page of this thing over here? And once that starts to shift, I think it's that their whole academy, that's what you'd call it, is just going to collapse like a house of cards, because it's really not being propped up by anything besides insanity anyway. Cool. All right. So the last 15 minutes, let's talk about you. First of all, I'm also an only child. So only child, high five. Yep. It sucks. What are you going to do? I mean, do you want to run for office one day? Are you going to write a book? What's up with Nicole?
I think I'm still figuring that out. I think I can be a lot more influential in helping the right people get into office. That's something I've always been very passionate about. I think, I've worked with a lot of candidates, especially in New York. And I think candidate recruitment and cultivation is big. I'm a practical politics type of person. I'm, very campaign strategy minded. That's where my career started, but it's also just what I believe in electoral politics. I just do. And I have these arguments a lot of times with friends who say, well, it's kind of like the cultural argument. Well, yeah, electoral politics, but also everyone sucks and you don't have good candidates and the system is flawed. And I get all of that. But to me, there needs to be a comprehensive approach that has multiple factors working together. And the electoral politics piece is very important, and especially in places like New York, which is obviously a blue state, deep blue city, New York City. There's a hunger right now. There is a hunger for change, and everyone says that all the time. All the candidates here will say that at every single speech, but that it's true. There is a hunger, but you have to invest in resources. You have to invest in campaign infrastructure. You have to invest in candidate recruitment, candidate development, and you have to have really good publicists, like you said, really good strategists. There are a lot of people in New York who think they can run as MAGA candidates with their MAGA hats and win. And that's just not good strategy in a place like New York City. New York City can go from deep blue to purple to maybe light red in a few years. It can't go from deep blue to deep red. It's not going to yeah. Alabama. Right. But there's so many obstacles in places like New York. People on our side who stand in our way, people who should be helping us, who stand in our way from accomplishing, from having more wins in places like New York City. But that's where I think, I really want to be influential, is getting more of the right people elected to office and seeing how we can take some of these cultural conversations that are happening and codify them and actually turn them into concrete actions, right? So if we're talking about wokeism and how horrible it is in schools, and parents are complaining that their kids are being sexualized, okay, what are we doing about that? What is the New York City Department of Education doing about that? And who are the people putting pressure on that department? Who are the people leading it? Who are the people putting pressure on it? How does it all happen? Practically, how do we get it done? How do we strip curricula I'm using New York City as an example because I'm from New York. How do we strip it of its wokeism? There's a process to do that, and we can do it. But no one seems to really want to go through that process. And I don't think it's that hard. I mean, and I get a lot of questions or a lot of retorts like, well, there isn't enough money, and that's just couldn't be further from the truth. In places like New York City, I think the recent statistic is that 1 out of every 22 people is a billionaire or is a millionaire in New York City, millionaire. And New York City has the most millionaires. Okay, well, if you know how millionaires or billionaires operate, you know that they're not naturally ideological people. They will invest in whoever they think can win and whoever will be for their business.
Yeah, totally.
Republicans don't seem to understand that. And it's like, why? I'm not brilliant for saying that. But some of the changes that, again, like I am at heart local state politics, practical electoral politics kind of person, strategy. So for me, I think that's where I want to be, impactful, is how do we get the right people elected to office who can actually, implement President Trump's agenda, because I do believe in the America First agenda, very much so. I believe in President Trump from the very beginning. I've always believed in him. This is going to be so important for beyond these next 4 years. That's where we need to look now, is what happens beyond these next 4 years, so that all of this progress is sustainable.
So last question, what do right-wing people think? Like, I've heard people say what you're saying so many times, and I just don't totally understand what they mean. What do the right-wing donors think? Like you're saying that they don't understand that the voter will just go with whoever. Sorry, what exactly were you saying about millionaires and what the right doesn't understand?
So I think, the millionaires in New York City, for example, there are a lot of people who have money, and a lot of them would like to donate to a cause, right? And they have concerns and they have issues that they care about, and it comes to a point where it doesn't matter how rich you are, there's still issues that you have to deal with, right? There's still issues that are kind of not being controlled by, you can't just buy the solution, or at least not directly. So the issue that Republicans have in a place like New York City is that they don't know how to incentivize donors to donate to Republican campaigns. And a big part of that lack of incentive is a lack of quality candidates with quality campaigns and quality campaign infrastructure that can actually win in a place like New York. And it's not a demographics issue, because that's what you'll hear from Republicans all the time. Oh, it's, there's an overwhelming number of Black voters here. No, Black voters will, a lot of them voted for Trump. Hispanic voters, 50% of Hispanic men in New York went for Trump. Jewish voters, I think the statistic was 48% of Jewish voters in New York went for Trump. So the point is, it's not a demographic issue. It is 100% a low quality candidate and campaign infrastructure issue. It's a low quality grassroots issue. So there is no grassroots activism on the right in places like New York. There's no messaging apparatus. There's no good communication strategy. These are all issues that are within our control that we can fix, so we can incentivize donors to donate to candidates who can actually win in New York and implement some of these changes. There's also a big ego problem that we don't talk about. And this is pretty common sense. In places like New York, there are these entities, right-wing entities, that are always at war with each other. Who's the bigger deal? Who's this? Who's on media? And who is, controlling a posse of consultants, and means that they have more power? And who's pocketing the money? Like there's always an ego here that gets in the way of us making progress. And until we can sit down and say, okay, like these are the issues that we have to confront here, they are totally within our control to fix, we're going to keep losing in places like New York. And by the way, the president is from Queens. His heart will always be in New York. It's Mar-a-Lago, it's on Florida, it's on in DC. His heart is in New York. It always has been. He has a vested interest in New York doing well, politically and in every way. So we have a real chance here. And how does this relate to the rest of the country? New York is the center of so many things. And if New York starts to flip to red as a whole, that will have a ripple effect across the whole country, again, on a state and local level.
Yeah, totally. Well said. Well, you're the woman to talk to about local stuff, particularly in New York. And I do think we can turn New York red for sure. And Miami, which we already did, and LA. That's what I'm working on. But okay. Thank you so much, Nicole. This was a really, really great conversation. Appreciate it. And yeah, I'll put all the links to your Twitter and everything in the bio. And yeah, we'll talk soon.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Bye.